lot of expertise in this room. I'm talking to you because I'm the one who first gets to vote against this bill. But it's not, that's an easy thing for me because it's a bad bill. There's no moral courage in me saying no to an awful bill. That's like telling me, hey, you have to stop eating liver. I hate liver. That's not a sacrifice. I'm not sacrificing anything by voting no on this bill. I want y'all to be clear. I get no props for voting no. What I should be getting props for is converting as many Democrats, not Republicans, Democrats, to do the right thing, who are either ignorant of the bill, which doesn't mean that they are ignorant or stupid or bad or corrupt. It means they don't know what's in the bill. But they see lawyers and colleagues say, oh, this is a good bill. Oh, my boy in the Senate, he's a co-sponsor. Oh, there's 3, 4, 5 Democratic co-sponsors of this Republican bill. It's a Republican bill. You hear me? Is that clear?
Yes.
It's a Republican bill. I don't care how many Democrats have lent their names to it. And it's not probation reform, it's probation deform. Because probation is supposed to be an alternative to incarceration, right? I mean, these are facts.
Right.
That's what it's supposed to be. But you're going to create a probation reform bill that is an on-ramp to incarceration and indefinite supervision. And it's not community supervision, it's state supervision. Because if we were in charge of our people and supervising and caring for them, that's restorative justice. That's not what this bill is about. That's what we need to be focusing on the Judiciary Committee. So, there are 10 Democrats, 15 Republicans. That means
Hey, bro,
you need
you come
majority
watch it with me like it's
to
on
shut this
TV.
down.
Yes.
This is basic math. That
Come watch
number
it
is
with me like
13.
it's on TV.
There's 10 Democrats. You need 3 Republicans to say, I'm not down with this. That's a really hard thing to achieve because I'll be honest, I'm guessing from past voting records that most of my Democratic colleagues will support this. If only because so many of their respected colleagues in the Senate have lent their name to it. If that's the only reason they do it, it's for that reason. The other reason is they can say, hey, look, I voted on the most bipartisan, most comprehensive probation reform bill in years. They get to go back home and say, I did this. And if their constituents don't know who you all are, they're going to get, oh, that's great. They're helping with criminal justice reform. And they will be clueless. And if the media doesn't report it as well, or as often, or substantively as it should, then it's a false victory at the expense of all of you in a much larger community. What, 180,000 people statewide? And mass supervision, all the people under mass supervision is larger than the second city in Pennsylvania. We can't afford mass supervision, and we don't need mass supervision. I oppose mass supervision, I oppose mass detention and mass incarceration. I support mass liberation. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here. So, this is how you ask me, well, how can you help, right? Because I'm not here to throw Democrats under the bus. If I didn't have the good fortune of having a number of hardcore experts on this come to me and say, Brad, you need to know how bad SB 913 is, I wouldn't know. So I'm not here saying, oh, I'm the smartest one, or I saw this come. I didn't know any of this until some people in this room said, let me pull you aside, we got some issues with this bill. I'm like, what bill? I'm being transparent. I don't need to be an expert on everything. My expertise is networking like this. I surround myself with people who are a hell of a lot smarter than I am. That's how I learn. I'm here tonight to learn as much as tell you what I need from you. But since we're on the subject, I need your help to convert as many Democrats to be no votes with me when this awful bill comes up in September or October or November. There's a way to do that. And I think you said putting something sweet in the medicine.
Yeah.
It might involve some flattery. you know, giving people a little space, little grace. Like, I know you meant well, but, you know, let's talk. Not in front of, not on social media, one-on-one, behind the scenes. Look, I know you mean well, but look, this is a bad bill. Here's why. Here's how we can make it better. That's where Keisha Hudson and others have stepped up to help me, because I'm not going to be able to shelve this bill. I don't have that power. The minority chair of judiciary does not have that power, and probably not the interest, because it's a lot of political capital on one bill, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. But no, you mean well, but look, this is a bad bill. Here's why. Here's how we can make it better. That's where Keisha Hudson and others have stepped up to help me, because I'm not going to be able to shelve this bill. I don't have that power. The minority chair of judiciary does not have that power, and probably not the interest, because it's a lot of political capital on one bill, and it's a marathon, not a sport. Because they're not going to take the. You mean well, but look, this is a bad bill. Here's why. Here's how we can make it better. That's where Keisha Hudson and others have stepped up to help me, because I'm not going to be able to shelve this bill. I don't have that power. A better version of the original bill? Absolutely. You all have the power. Because it's a lot of political capital on one bill, and it's a marathon, not a sport. Because this is how we take it. You mean well, but look, this is a bad bill. Here's why. Here's how we can make it better. That's where Keisha Hudson and others. Will you publicly support this amendment? Yes. Great. Then you have Democrats on your side. And if you can get their support, that means the House Democrats, the 9 other House Democrats who are on this committee with me, can then have the space to say, I'm only for SB 913 if Rabb's amendment passes. Does that make sense? All right. Then the much harder thing is finding those 3 Republicans. That's real hard. I don't have any suggestions right now. I'll be thinking on it. But there's a lot of wisdom in the room. Who are those 3? Now, if you can't get them and it's voted out of the House committee, it then goes to the House floor. If my amendment does not pass, which it probably won't, we can try again on the House floor. So there's a second bite of the apple. We can see what we can do on the House floor and get more Democrats to oppose it. And we can get enough energy to get the governor to say he's going to veto it if it passes. Now, as you know, the governor has 1 foot out the door. He's a very rich man. Did you know that? Very rich. He can mess up for the rest of his life, and his grandkids still gonna be rich. That's how he's doing. Good guy, but he may not want to spend a lot of political capital on this one issue, unless we're a pain in his ass. This would be a good fight. If we can get to him early and let him see how awful 913 is, and that we have suggestions to improve it, we might have some leverage. So there's not one way to succeed. There's a lot of steps along the way, but we won't be successful if we don't try. Right? My mother used to say, you have a 0% chance, you don't try. So this strategy is doable. We got to start with the Democrats who are on the Judiciary Committee with me. Separately, we got to talk to the Democrats who you all have a relationship with in the Senate to get them to support my amendment that Keisha Hudson and others will be helping me draft and get ready for this bill. And then we got to use social media, we got to go grassroots, do all the things that you already know how to do and put it into effect. I want to be clear and concrete so you understand what the steps are, knowing that if we are successful doing that, we can make change. But this is the likely path to do it. I don't believe you're going to impress upon most Republicans to care about black folk in this country, or Philadelphians of any race. That is not on their radar. But you can be successful if we work the plan, the plan to work. Yes, sir.
Dr. Bigelow and one particular phone. Can you get them those kids? Look at it. You will need our support.
It would be great if he supported the amendment. Because if he supported the amendment, that means he doesn't have to make any negative commentary about Democrats who supported this awful bill. He doesn't even have to talk about it. He says, let's have a better version of 913 that just goes even further. He could do that without expending a lot of time. The heat melted his seat. That's how I operate. So that's a great question. I think the answer is, if you don't get him talking about all the bad stuff that says, here's how to make it better, I think that's something that the right people could convince him to do. That's probably the simplest way to get him involved. He's not going to clown any Democrat. And he's also not going to go out of his way to go after Republicans either, because he needs Republicans in November. So he could just say, we will have a better outcome if this bill is slightly amended. And just talk.
Can we get them to talk about it? Because he's going to have it.
All right.
And we can bring some exposure to it.
All right, cool.
It would be good to get him before the election.
Right here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think somebody.
Well, I think that's a really good idea. My recommendation is, once there's a draft of this amendment that stakeholders can get behind and say, this is a good amendment, this is something we would want people to vote for someone like him and a lot of other folks, you need something, you need a concrete ask based on a concrete document. And that amendment would lay that all out. And getting folks who are supportive of him, who've already endorsed him, already supporting him, or allies of him, to get him on board with that. Well, I think that's a really good idea. My recommendation is, once there's a draft of this amendment that stakeholders can get behind and say, this is a good amendment, this is something we would want people to vote for. Technically, it is radical, right? Because you're talking about group change, or some systemic change about the probation system. So, in many respects, it is a substantive approach, but it shouldn't be anything he would oppose, because it's not something that I think is so controversial that it would push him off his platform.
So, one thing we'll say is the governor, you mentioned the governor and the veto, he did say way back in 2014 when he would not support it, it didn't approve that. They long abandoned the cap. So it'd be good to revisit our collective support by putting pressure on the government. That's number one. You mentioned Josh Shapiro, who here's the potential be a shoe in. I think that we got to rally this collective power to have that conversation, right? Because at the end of the day, no matter who Republicans think that's supposed to do, they're going to have to find a word. And we need to give some shortages up front so we can rally our troops to leverage that power. So thank you for those points, Mr. Governor. Another point that was made was about supervision, right? So when we talk about supervision, I want to bring Bob in real quick to talk about something. How many of y'all are married? How many folks here now? How many people got children? And we all got family. So Ramona, stand up for a second. I mentioned earlier that she was on supervision. We want to clarify. She ain't never been locked up. She ain't never been in jail. But she's married to this wonderful young man right here. So talk to us about what supervision is, what it looks like to the family, and then we're going to take that right to Mr. Reed to talk about the impact of supervision.
Together?
Y'all together, man. It's a family affair.
Well, I'm not on probation. I'm on parole. But the best description to describe what is going on is my life is wrapped up in supervision as the property of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. One thing for anyone that goes through any legal proceeding in the state of Pennsylvania, it states the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania versus Bobby Harris, or in anyone else's case, your name. That means the entire Commonwealth versus you. Right now, that verse for me is that I must live with the supervision that any life that I may conceive, it must be sought to be requested. And requested while on bended knee. Let me say that again. It must be requested on bended knee. I'm a higher level of their supervision for two reasons. The first one is I have knowledge of myself and I choose to stand and do what I do to fight for liberation for individuals that look like us. Individuals that live in a cesspool created by design, shaped and molded by hands that are not for us because they're not of us. Second, the other part of it is the policies in place states when an individual is under supervision, I have to ask, wife, can I take you out? Then I have to go ask, as anyone under supervision must go do. Ask your supervisor, your parole or probation officer, can I take my wife out? If they say no, I'm failing to perform as an upright man or husband towards my wife, my responsibility. So what it caused a lot of fear. And that fear reminds me of something else that a brother shared with me today. Delinquency, a conduct that is not in accord with a accepted behavior pattern. Right now, we're living in a society where our elected party, as well as outside organizations, are coming into the state of Pennsylvania, dictating policy that's not in accord with the people, you and I. So we're blocked from ever being able to express that. I'm restricted in what kind of work I can do, where I can go with that work, who I can work for. My wife, she can share her own experiences and pain of it. But supervision never afford us an opportunity to live a qualified life. Supervision, if we're proving to the correctional officer, if we're proving to the Department of Correction, if we're proving to the probation and the parole board that we have transformed our lives in a meaningful way as a productive, upright woman or man, and they accept the paperwork to dictate to and dictate my life, to share her own experience go home from incarceration of my past. But supervision never afford us an opportunity to live a qualified life. Second test, supervision. If we're proving to the correctional officer, if we're proving to the Department of Correction, if we're proving to the probation and the parole board that we have transformed our lives in a meaningful way as a productive, upright woman of faith, and they accept the paperwork today for them to indicate our life, to share our own experience from the feelings. But supervision never afford us an opportunity to qualify. Second time, supervision, if we're proving to the correctional officer, if this SB, what is that?
913. 913.
913. Don't affect.
Someone's back here, bro.
It's a dereliction of duty for anyone advocating for the hurt, the despised.
You need to
and
use the
rejected.
bathroom?
And it's a reflection of what is to come. For those of us on the higher levels of supervision, oppression, that means when it comes
kind of bag
time
was
for
it?
you and I
You
to
wanna
be
go east?
liberated,
What's
and
up?
this
I
is
got a
why
suitcase, man.
you must be involved with this
I got a
fight
big one.
because you're the class above that. You're the class that they are pleased to deny and restrict. They're going to say no, and we will never be able to get those invisible shackles up off of us. I do not like that a supervisor can disturb my balance when I've been home for 4 years. November makes 5. I am the first and only black water distributor in the state of Pennsylvania. Progress. I am a owner of my own trucking company, Progress. I am a husband, perfecting myself every day to be upright. I'm not all right. That's why my therapist right there. I walk with him. I talk with him. But perfecting myself as best as possible because I must deal with the overseers of supervision whose goal and mission is to reincarcerate an individual for a minor offense. If I smoke a little joint, I don't smoke it, but what if I did and it was medical purposes? If I smoke two, what if it did? You're not looking to heal the community, you're looking to continue the incarceration of the people. In supervision, you should be a teacher and a guide to get the women and men square on their feet and allow them to spread their wings. Otherwise, you are not a friend of the world, but an enemy of the world, overseeing and dictating wickedness, manifesting that high power mentality of an oppressor. So when I speak like this, I speak like this because I'm born in this. Now you can speak to my wife. What is it like for you? What is it like? And speak uncut, baby. And she have a mouth. Get out the way.
He did on the spot.
Speak up, come on, Ramona.
It is very unnerving on a daily basis because you don't know what you want to get. As a wife of someone that has been incarcerated, I've never experienced it myself because I've never been locked up. But to have someone be able to come into my home, go in my refrigerator if they want to, go in my underwear drawer if they want to, just because that's what they feel like doing on any day, is very unnerving. I can't own a gun. That's my stuff there. But I can't own a gun because my husband's has. And my thing is, if he has served his time and he was afforded the opportunity to come home, and because they just didn't turn him loose, he earned that. Why can't he live the life that everybody else does that hasn't been in his position? So it's a challenging situation, and I'm up for the challenge because that's mine. But at the same time, I think that everybody here that has been under supervision, you all deserve to have your total freedom. Total freedom, because this is not total freedom. If you are still fighting for just the opportunity to cross county lines, this is not total freedom. So, I mean, my thing is, we all have to stick together with this. This man said that he will do an amended bill, and we're gonna have to ride on them. Because if not, the organizations like Reform, that's very miseducated, and I'll say it, nobody else is saying it, I'll say it. They're miseducated. And they're placing a narrative out here that's not true, and they're not getting to the meat of that bill. Then, you know, you're all set, it's all gonna be a setup for trouble for everybody. So, I mean, this is all I have to say.
Thank you so much. So we went through the defense side, the legislative side, the personal side, the family side. We want to talk about, so I'm a person, I came home, and I'm not on probation, but I am on supervision since July 8, 2002. So you do that math, right? I've had bills come out at 3 o'clock in the morning. Right? I've been denied passes to travel. I remember one thing Meek Mill said, 20 minutes before. It made him feel less than a man or a father. Ask another man, can he take his child to Disney? Can he take his child for a family vacation? And that's something you all deal with every single time that you want to cross that county line. Whatever, family union, through, whatever. Somebody else has the power to say no. And it does something to you, psychologically, emotionally. And when you serve your time, Bobby just gave you the whole process. You had to get the jail approved, you had to go in front of the board, you had to humble yourself. Everybody sitting here know what that felt like to sit across that table. Right? But now you're in a position where you're working, you're serving the community, you're doing everything you can, and then somebody holding the strings like you're a puppet, right? On your manhood, on your identity. So I want to talk to Mr. Reed about what the supervision does to, what does it do to a person's psyche when you have the appearance of freedom, but not real freedom. When you have the semblance of independence, but you're not truly independent because somebody else can dictate your whereabouts. So you're constantly with that fear of will you cut that string today? Will they revoke my probation? Will they violate me? For whatever the reason may be. Every time you see them flashing blue lights in your rearview mirror, will this be the day that this cop pulled out his car and snapped the cuffs on you? Meanwhile, you got bills to pay, you got children to raise, you got a job to be responsible for, you got a community that's depending on you, and one little incident like that can change it all. And Flash, you talking about, and come over this way so the folks can see you. Talk to us about what that does to the site.
All right, so greetings, everybody. Greetings. My name is Douglas Reed. I am the Director of Partnership for an organization called Black Men Give. We give free therapy to black men. I also have a nonprofit organization called Synergy Reform, formerly incarcerated individuals working alongside with individuals who have worked in law enforcement. So I prepared it to say, I worked 25 years in corrections. I worked in the county jail and I worked in the federal prison. I also worked what they call receiving and discharge, as you already know. So I've stripped inmates down from head to toe, knowing what that felt like to do a man like that. So what this bill, what everything reminds me of, because when I came into corrections out of the military, there was only one organization that was hiring, that was the prison system. Reason being because of the 1986 Anti-Drug Act. I didn't know anything about what was going on. I had just came back from Germany. So when I come back from Germany, I got addicted to the money because that's where all the overtime. So in my tenure working in corrections, I always wondered what was actually going on. I spoke to too many brothers. They're like, yo, CO, only have 5 grams of coke or whatever. This is what they gave me. Look what they gave the white boy. So I started to study, and then when I come from a loving family. So my mom was always one that would always take anybody in their home. So when I finished my tenure, I wanted to give back. And the way I wanted to give back, I started working in an organization called Reinventing Reentry. I traveled the country putting on simulations to show individuals, legislators, community leaders, what happens when somebody is released out of prison and what they have to do.
I want the one where it's more wider.
How they gotta go get their license, they gotta go see the probation officer, they don't have an ID. So that was to actually teach them. Actually was in Arizona with the Arizona Public Defenders, was the first time I did it. So all that combined, I wanted to learn more, and it puts me in a state of mind because now we talk about mass incarceration. In my studies, in my personal studies, it took me back to black codes. See, because black codes was during the Reconstruction years where people got upset, for white folks. They got upset because we were coming out trying to get jobs and better ourselves. So what they did was a setup called black codes. We went from black codes, we went from Jim Crow, we went to, dealing with civil rights. Now we're dealing with mass incarceration. So what I've learned is working inside. I'm not a therapist. I talked to Bobby on many a times. What I have learned is the impact. Even when I worked in when I worked in the hole, where a guy was locked up 24/7 and I only let him out for an hour. When I put him back, if I fed him, why he didn't want me to leave because he wanted to talk. Because what was going through his mind, because he was in that cell for 24/7. See, now when I got out, I understood the impact that it had on trauma. I understood the setup that it took. Because if you remove a black man out of the family, you remove him out of this country. You remove him for having a voice. So now what I've learned is you got to give the opportunity. And this is where, like, my passion for Black Men Heal, and Bobby's going through there, is this transition when you actually release. I don't give supervised release, probation, parole. Mental health should play a part in it. Because on the average, I can only talk about the 1986 crack law, the average amount of time was 10 to 12 years. Now somebody has been incarcerated in that kind of system 10 to 12 years, you put him back, but yet you send him to a halfway house, and you tell me he's gonna only make a certain amount of money, black codes, because now they taking 25% from him. Because it's a business, $1 billion business. You already know. So what we need to do is, even in this transition, as you come back out, there's gotta be help for you. We all been traumatized. I remember we was up in New York at Exodus Transitional Center, and we were talking about trauma. Young man got up and he said, you know what, I want to know what trauma is. I lived trauma all my life. So now I'm starting to learn to address these pains. It happened when I was 5 years old. It happened when I was 13 years old, and I dealt with it. But we as men, what we have a tendency to do is put it on our back and hold on to it, never expressing the fact that we have an issue or to have the opportunity to talk about it. So I think mental health plays a big part of that, because I think now we approach it. Now, even I think it's HR 1475, which is actually a bill that was talking about the disparity in mental health. It's somewhere in the White House, probably in the Senate, just laying there, because nobody wants to address it. I know there's been some things in the White House about the youth and the mental health, but what about people that have been incarcerated? I remember when I came in the system, I was thinking even then, what is going to happen when these guys are done? What are you going to afford? We're not talking about, they wasn't talking about rehabilitation. I saw that. So that's why I wanted to give back. So I think the trauma plays a major part of it. I think mental health has to be a part of this process, because now we're trying to make men and women whole. In order to make them whole, I went through Black Man Hill personally myself. It changed my life. I was carrying around a situation that my father was shot when I was 4 years old, shot in the head, because him and his friend had an argument about who was the oldest. No, I wasn't there, but I went with that trauma from not having a father in my life and carrying it, being angry. I've been depressed. I've been in the military. I've been serving in the military 25 years. So I know how it feels to carry certain traumas. That trauma of being incarcerated, that trauma of trying to come out here and do your best for your family, not to get in certain situations, not to be in a situation. Now we talk about police officers. We don't even trust a police officer now. So now we're going to have something where we give them the authority that you can check my file, go to the car, look in the file, and run everything. And he didn't like you from the start because of what you wore or whatever. So he has the authority we're going to put the authority back to him and get you and send you back? No, we can't do that. Because what happens is, even the parole officers, the probation officer, myself working in prison, guess what? One thing for sure, two things for certain. We were always understaffed. Those people working in those positions are understaffed. It is easier probably to write you a technical violation than to work with you. So you out here doing what you can do just to make a difference, trying to be the upright man, trying to be the upright woman. We don't want to find you in a situation that we're giving the authority back to police officers who we don't trust, giving them back the authority to lock us back up. It's a setup. We go from slavery, we go to black codes, we go to Jim Crow, we go to mass incarceration. I'm sitting there and listening to this and saying we still here. I'm a baby boomer. I'm 58 years old. For me to see this now, all the study that I've done, it is tearing our communities and our families up. So we talk about amendment. I was thinking about, we talk about the Democrats, we talk about the Republicans, how he's outnumbered.
Go back to another
But
camera.
yet he kept it real.
Go back to another camera until he situated himself right.
We got to get the force behind the amendment. We got to put pressure on the governor. He's on his way out. These are the things that need to happen. So there's got to be a collective effort. And going back to mental health, you got to be in the right state of mind. You got to be in the right state of mind. So those are the things that we look at. Those are the things where I feel that Black Men Hill, I feel that therapy, I feel that counseling plays a major impact on things that you do. Plays a major impact on you being able to cope with certain things in your life, being able to cope with it, deal with it,
Make yourself a better person. Of course, make yourself a better citizen. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, bro. I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much. It was really helpful, bro. I was watching it outside. I was like, hey, you like this shit, huh? It's fun to do.
Yeah.
It's fun to do.
How many people in therapy have a
How'd you
therapist?
get into this?
I made a movie called Liddy City with some young bucks, some young friends of mine, right? And then I was like, yo, I like this shit, bro. And then I just built a big ass studio. I do all the podcasts and do all the videos for the niggas Capone, Davies, and all them niggas. Yeah.
Nice setup.
I have fun, man.
Yeah.
I ain't got to do much. You did. Sit still.
But mass supervision is mass supervision.
But no, you're doing it though.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't gotta do much. I already set it up that I can just sit down and watch. Really, I'm streaming it to
The
YouTube.
power's in this room. The power's with the people here. We don't have no more time to sit on our hands. This group has to mobilize because of a number of reasons. I just learned today, and I want to ask
You fucking
Rep
my camera
Kraft
work
to
up.
take the question. But I want to ask Rep Kraft to go back up here for 2 minutes and talk about something I just learned today that blew my mind. That they just passed a bill that made it illegal for you to run from the police now. You don't know that? They just passed a bill that made it illegal for you, for me, for everybody to run from a police dog. So if they say stop and let the dog loose and you run, that's another charge. Tell them about it, right? This is what they doing to our lives. So in this context, we need y'all to understand.
So, dog is a cop. It's an extension of the police officer, right? It's a police officer. So it doesn't have to be a dog. It can be, yeah, so, and it's not just the animal, it's also the cop. You run from the cops on foot. You flee, that's a criminal
I did.
offense. Yes. If they set a dog after you and you run away from the dog, that's an offense. It's worse.
And don't hit one early.
So, well, here's the thing. Depends. If you run, let's say it's in your neighborhood, you know where to go to get away from this dog about to get you. You do this, and the dog jumps into a well and dies. It's a felony. And you gotta pay for the dog. You have to pay for the time of the police officer who has worked with the dog. All of that. So if you're 18, no job, you run because imagine like what happened with these protests. Somebody threw a can through the window and you were standing next to him. The guy runs and the cop looks at you. Say that, oh, that's the dude. And you didn't do it. They come after you. You're not trying to get caught up in that, right? You're not trying to get arrested. That's resisting arrest. Misdemeanor, right? So you run. They chase you. Cop trips. Boom. Goes to the next level. Or the dog comes after you. Now this is based on something that happened in Pittsburgh where a police dog died, jumped down the elevator shaft to its death. The funeral for the dog was bigger than the person who they killed as a result of it. Okay? That's the sick, twisted stuff I got to deal with every day when I'm on this committee. It just was passed. Now the governor did not sign it into law. He can just let it go into law without his signature because he knew it was bad. He could have vetoed it, but he didn't. He didn't. We can't let that happen with 913. We cannot let that happen. We need to get in front of this and let these folks know how bad this is. But if we give them an alternative, it makes it easier for them. Say, this is a good amendment. If we can even get some Republicans to support it, that gives them some more political leverage. But that's exactly right. This just happened a couple of days ago where it became law. How many people are going to know that you running from a dog is trying to get you criminalizes your natural instinct to run from danger? That's what we're up against.
You want to add to that?
I just want to add that in reaction to and in response to the rising gun violence, right? The narrative of how can we address these issues and having some dangerous conversations, I think, about.
Yeah. No, man, I be needing help. I mean, if you want to come down, you know. What you do? What you do for a living?
What
you do for a living?
Legislation does, there's other legislation
This is
that's.
No, so I might get jobs. So one of the things is because when I go where I go at, people always ask me, "Yo, where you going next? Or what can you do?" You know what I mean? So I can make movies. I can make documentaries. You give me some documentary stuff. We can play some documentaries. You know how you might get a nigga that been in jail. Like, yo, bro, I got a story to tell. I want to tell my documentary. I charge nigga $3,000 for the documentary. I'll follow them around. I'll film all the people they want in the documentary. Whatever the case may be. And break it down. I'm charging him $2,000 for his documentary because, you know what I'm saying? Oh, yeah. I'm charging him $2,000 for his documentary. Good dude, you know what I'm saying? He making some things happen.
On this parallel, so you understand it's all connected. We can't fall asleep at the wheel on this issue to allow them to put some atrocious.
And then I make it easy for the kids.
If you need an assistant, man,
Yeah.
I definitely push some buttons.
It ain't hard. It ain't hard. Just get the angles. Boom. So my whole thing is, if I have somebody to come help put the wires together, they pay me $400 for it. I had to come in here and myself put the wires together. I'd have gave up on it. Fix all these wires. You understand what I'm saying?
Chris, this question is for you. All right. I'm not understanding why there is a rush to get such a massive bill passed. And is there an opportunity to pull it back, to convince your colleagues that there's a lot more discussion and education that needs to go on here, and to show how many people are truly disturbed by some of the rights that are lost in the bill? There are definitely trade-offs in the bill. There are some things that are advanced. The meat mill situation is advanced. Absolutely. That's what they wanted. But there are things that you lose in terms of due process rights. This is a process-oriented, procedural-oriented bill. It's not going to take care of every problem of probation. And is there an opportunity to pull it back, to convince your colleagues that there's a lot more discussion and education that needs to go on here, and to show how many people are truly disturbed by some of the rights that are lost in the bill? There are definitely trade-offs in the bill. There are some things that are advanced. The meat mill situation is advanced. Absolutely. That's what they wanted. But there are things that you lose in terms of due process rights. This is important. A big area that has had infrastructure for decades, that we can't rush this. How practical is it to pump the brakes on it?
That's a great question. So, this is really important to know. Whoever's in the majority in the Senate dictates what bill. They don't need to talk to a single Democrat. They don't need to play around with others like we're supposed to learn in kindergarten. That doesn't happen in Harrisburg. So whoever's in charge, that party dictates what happens. We know that the bill is now coming to the House. It's just the leadership of the House Republicans that determine what bills come up and when they come up. The political motivations for that are beyond me because I'm not conservative white Republican. I'm a progressive black Philadelphian, right? So I don't know. Mike, if I had to guess, it would be that this is one less thing that Democrats can snipe about Republicans for not doing by saying, oh, you don't do anything around criminal justice reform. So they can say, oh, we did this. We did probation reform. Why y'all coming at me? And we got Democrats on board. We got black people, Reform Alliance, all these folks coming on board. Everybody's supporting this, and it makes them look good, even though they're making things worse. So if there's any pressure, political pressure, for them to look better than they do now, with the upcoming election on November 8th, that might be a reason. It's not a good reason. It's not rooted in integrity or decency, but that is a reason. That is a guess. I have no idea, but there are those of you who have insights with some of these stakeholders who are supporting the bill. So those of you who know anyone with Reform Alliance can probably do a lot better guessing than I can because they're pushing this bill.
Why is it reform here so we can be talking to them about the issue of trying to pull back. If this is for people, and people are divided on this, why are we?
470.
Because reform doesn't live here.
So now we're gonna jump into the deep one. Thank you for that question. So reform was invited to participate, let's be clear.
470.
Number one. And number two, we were engaged with reform in conversation before this bill ever came out. And the last conversation we had before this bill came out was that, yo, we might not agree, we might end
Gonna make
up
you read the
on
dream,
the
bro.
opposite ends of this probation reform.
Read the dream,
Some
yep.
people say
That's my name.
we believe in
For
others.
real? I'm going
But if we walk away, let's walk
you,
away
bro.
with respect.
Kareem the Dream, they call me, bro.
Conversations, so that we could, you know, remain in community to build something that's meaningful.
It's crazy, right?
One of
It's
the
destiny,
very
right?
things
Because
that
of
we
Allah on my
disagree
shit.
with about that administrative probation, administrative supervision. was
Hold that
one of the
camera
things that
still
made
for me,
it
bro. Hold that
Now,
camera
mind
still
you,
for me.
that conversation is before SB 913 came out. In the dark of night, or whatever, and that's just me, they met with Senator Lisa Baker, who authored this bill, and included all the things coincidentally the reform stood for, and we haven't really been in good space with the right? All of y'all who attended meetings with us back
Try to keep it
a
still.
couple
I got
summers
your
ago,
camera on.
they took the email list and started sending out to how many of y'all got an invitation for a grant from reform? Anybody in this room? Okay, but it happened. You know, they reached out to directly impacted people. Hey, you know, we want to offer y'all, you know, grants, community grants, whatever. And, you know, so we just don't agree principally on what real probation reform looks like. So when we reached out, we invited the director, Robert Brooks. Never responded. Not no thank you, not I can't make it. So that's why they're not here. They're not, we wanted to have a robust conversation that both sides could be represented. But that didn't happen. So it's not our fault. Because we extended the olive branch and said, yo, all we try to do is educate the people so they make an informed decision on whether to support or oppose this bill. Yeah, our position is opposition. But we want y'all, we want everybody to walk around, fill up that 300,000 that we up there to talk about, you know, to be informed about what this bill is, what it's going to do in terms of impact their lives. But we couldn't have that because, you know, they just didn't. I wish that, you know, we could have had a robust conversation with them, but.
He's helping me.
I just got 2 points that I want to say. One of them, when we speak about probation and parole, it's 2 different things. I'm standing here with a piece of paper in my wallet. My wallet, I got a piece of paper that says life on it. So man, got the type of nothing. It's a piece of paper that I like carry every time I walk around. They got life on it. And that's the ugly thing. When we speak about these things, how serious it is, when we look at back in the day to the future, history is repeating itself at a very, very high state. So when we hold these conversations, when we get in these meetings, every time you hear this man talk, he's looking for the powers to do this. And they're not there. Secondly, he was a correctional officer. I went to jail in 1981. He was penitentiary in 1983. And he was ruled by white folks. My mother used to say, you don't listen to your black mama, your dad should listen to your white dad. I listened to him for 36 years. 36 hard years. You know, when we speak about going out town, when we speak about getting on these planes, when we speak about asking people, we taught ourselves, we trained ourselves, we learned how to love ourselves. And we out here to represent the people out here, but we ain't getting no juice. They don't want to give you no juice. All the police commissioners, she's busy. All Dr. Zaforkian, he's busy. Nobody don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear us talk. They don't want to see us walk. Businessman. They don't want us to get there. You got men sitting right there. He working hard. He working hard trying to get our
Absolutely.
But they don't want to listen. So when we speak about your experience as a correctional officer, we speak about your experience in that house. We here. We in this place. I got 2 jobs. Do I like them, Bobby? Can't say it, right? But I'm working. My wife right there. My childhood sweetheart. She always make a face. Same conversation you shared. When I bring up here, she gonna say the same thing. But it's so clear, it's still in the darkness. So I'm just sharing this with you. I'm not trying to be people about it, but it's reality. It's real life. Go home and watch the news. It's twisted. You do. Childhood offense. We standing here. We live. We women. We standing tall. But they don't want our conversation. Thank y'all.
All right. All right. Any other questions or comments? I want to say this, we still have a hand, we're going to get to, before y'all leave.
Speak up, brother.
I just want to reiterate what I stated earlier about giving Josh Shapiro on board. Because trying to stop this bill, like Kid said, the impact it's going to have on the community. We need this man to understand, the significance of this bill before we can go in there. And doubt the bill will pass before we'll be involved. So it's going to follow this thing. So, we need them on board before we can get it on. We need our before we can get it on. So, we can't gas this up. You know what I mean? So we need, we can firm that in the pocket before we can get it on. Once it becomes law, it's going to be a bad day.
This is surgery. Probation and shit.
That's our level.
Like the sign.
That's our level.
See the masses.
I did it.
Huh?
In order to get the
Somebody stepped on the wire.
see the number of
Right.
I did it. Oh, you did? Oh, yeah. I got it. I was supposed to get down, bro. I ain't did that.
not for now, but for future, because there's more to that.
You good, bro?
So they're gonna, I mean, and Chris, how likely is it that the House they got the numbers to pass this?
This bill will be easily passed. It will have probably a majority of Democrats
In the House?
in the House. You don't need a single Democratic vote to get any bill passed in the House. The magic number for us is 102, but there's 121 Republicans who don't have to show up to work. Then you have Democrats giving our votes to them. So we can't put this all on Republicans. We need to educate our own. You have to be resistant. I started the day with Frontline Day in North Philly. Ended my day in West Philly, Frontline's Day. I represent Northwest. There are other reps in Philly and beyond, not just black reps, Democrats across the state who you need to check and say, where are you on this and what are you going to do? It helps when we have an alternative with an amendment, say we need to be on this amendment.
Who is the driving force behind the Dems that are for it? Is it reform? Is it that money? What is it?
Well, the minority leader is Joanna McClinton, who doesn't live far from here. If Joanna McClinton says, oppose this bill, that will give us some leverage. I'm not sure if that's something she's willing to do, but you can ask her. And it's better if it comes from you than from me. Because there's more of y'all. So, the Clinton is the minority leader. You get her, you get them.
Okay, you get her,
With the minority leader.
but that still doesn't stop.
Like I said, we have a 0% chance if we don't try. Getting her on board would be a big win. I don't know how easy that is, but it has to be part of the strategy.
Right.
It has to be part of the strategy. She's going to be more inclined, like Josh Shapiro, to not badmouth the bill, but to amend it. Support the amendment, and that way you don't have to talk foul about Democrats. You can say, here's something even better, and we can even get bipartisan support. Can you help us?
Will she take it?
She doesn't have the power to table it.
Because it's already there.
No, because the minority leader has no authority to table anything. We can have a motion to table something, but we only have 89 votes, we need 102. And not even all Democrats would support that. Because this is a bill that will make a lot of Democrats in moderate to conservative districts look good. Because they can say, oh, we help with probation reform. Look, I'm so open-minded. And nobody's gonna hold their feet to the fire. In Philly, we'll have much stronger power because your base of strength is here. But there are Democrats far beyond Philly. But yeah, you can try to get a more minority leader McClinton on board. She's open-minded, she's smart, she's a lawyer. We gotta try. But the same thing applies on the political side with Josh Shapiro. He needs votes. And as a point, because this is relevant, and I know you two can speak to this, in the judiciary, in 2021, there were 4 spots, people were running for 4 spots in the appellate courts. Supreme Court, Superior, and Commonwealth. Out of the 4, 2 were Democrats. 2 Democrats, 1 out of the 4. 4 out of 4 Democrats could have won with just black voters who are already registered in Philadelphia alone, not the other 66 counties, but just in Philly alone. If we came out, we'd have all Democrats. So we have inordinate power, but people try to tell us we don't. When we use that power collectively, we become a force. And some of that force comes out when we know how to leverage that collective power and say, you need votes on November 8th. We can bring folks out. And I can personally testify to that because I had 14 returning citizens working every day on my campaign. And they were killing the game. They loved it. They got paid well. They were talking to neighbors, and people responded well to them. No one ever seen a turnout like that before. And my race got the highest voting turnout in the entire state of any contested race out of 203. And I'm not bragging on me. I'm bragging on the people who I paid who were doing the work, most of whom were returning citizens. So Josh Shapiro's no dummy. If he sees that there is a mass movement, and that can be reflected electorally on November 8th, he'll come to the table.
It might be, I don't know. What you say, right?
No, anybody.
You're not in a rush.
It scared me. Yeah, right. I don't need no case.
I don't know. We will be back in session sometime in September, and if they're gonna run the bill. It's all speculation right now because that has not been set. They cannot put that on the calendar yet because we don't even know when we're coming back to session. So it may seem like a rush, it may be likely that there's a rush, but it is not confirmed. We don't know what's coming up in September. A lot of that's gonna depend on the political winds that blow from now until then. It could be related to the insurrection, abortion rights, all this other stuff. We don't know.
That's my second part of
Yeah.
what I had to say was that for a while, we're still building an even broader coalition with the groups and organizations and the other folks that want to support this kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. And it also means, and this is my part, I ask you what I need, right? It's only fair that I say what I can do. I will try to bring as many state lawmakers on the right side of this issue as I can. I'm not a magician, so work with me, all right? I'm gonna do the best I can, and I'm not just gonna wish and hope for it. I'm gonna do the work. So I will try to convince as many of my colleagues, starting with my Democratic colleagues on the Judiciary Committee, to get on the right side of this. That's my commitment. And not just on the Judiciary Committee. I have friends outside the Judiciary. Like I said, there's 89 of us. So I will do what I can. One of the ways I think I can help is if I can put forth an amendment that people can really support. It would be helpful if I get the chair of the Black Caucus, who is very good on this issue, to support my amendment. To get Governor Wolf to support my amendment. Minority Leader Joanna McClendon to support the minority chair of Judiciary. All of those things require work on my part that can be backed up by all of you.